"The woman in my drawings is coming tonight." Prince Lucien Moretti said it without looking up, his small hand guiding a charcoal pencil across the paper, with the certainty of someone copying a face already standing before him. Across the royal study, Vampire King Vincent Moretti stopped turning the page of an ancient ledger. The castle around them remained silent, buried beneath a winter sky and nearly 2 feet of snow, but the candle flames along the walls leaned suddenly toward the boy. Lucien was 8 years old. He had spoken fewer than 100 sentences in the past 3 years, and he had never wasted one on imagination. Vincent rose from behind the black oak desk and crossed the room without making a sound. Another portrait rested beneath Lucien's hand. The same woman. Soft brown hair gathered loosely at her neck, clear eyes filled with patience, a gentle mouth curved as if she knew the boy was lonely, and had chosen not to mention it. Vincent had seen that face every day for years. It covered the walls of Lucien's private room, filled locked cabinets in the nursery, and appeared in the margins of books the prince was supposed to be studying. The clothes changed. Sometimes the woman wore a pale blue dress, sometimes a winter coat. Once, Lucien had drawn her standing beneath the castle's oldest clock, but her face never changed. "Who told you she is coming?" Vincent asked. Lucien shaded the woman's eyes. "No one. Did you dream of her again?" "I don't dream about her." The pencil moved slowly over the page. Scratch. Pause. "I remember her." Vincent's expression remained still, though something cold tightened behind his ribs. Lucien had never met the woman. Vincent had searched every human registry within 300 miles, questioned royal servants, examined guest records dating back a century, and quietly sent trusted agents through museums, hospitals, universities, and churches. No one had found her. The court physicians called the drawings a response to grief. The royal advisors called them an obsession. One elderly archivist had whispered that children sometimes heard things ancient castles refused to tell their kings. Vincent had dismissed them all. He trusted evidence, not legends. Yet Lucien could reproduce every detail of the woman's face without hesitation, down to the tiny crescent-shaped mark near her right eyebrow. "What is her name?" Vincent asked. Lucien finally looked up. His eyes, silver-grey like his father's, held none of a child's uncertainty. "I don't know yet." "Then how can you remember her?" "The castle remembers." A quiet knock came from the study door. Vincent turned. His steward, Mr. Hale, entered carrying a cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. He bowed first to the king, then to the prince. "Your Majesty, the restoration specialist from Boston has accepted the commission. Her train was delayed by the storm, but she reached the village an hour ago." Vincent took the envelope. "A human specialist. The damaged portrait in the West Gallery cannot survive another winter without treatment." Lucien's pencil stopped. For the first time that evening, emotion crossed his face, not surprise, recognition. "What is her name?" he asked. Mr. Hale glanced at the letter. "Evelyn Foster." The charcoal snapped between Lucien's fingers. Vincent looked down at the unfinished portrait. In the lower corner, where the boy usually left the paper blank, he had drawn something new. A small travel case rested beside the woman's feet. Snow covered her shoulders. Behind her stood the iron gates of Castle Moretti, open beneath the moon. Then the distant entry bell rang once, its deep note traveling through 300 rooms like a heartbeat returning to a sleeping body. Lucien rose so quickly his chair slid backward across the stone floor. "She's here," he whispered. Vincent faced the dark corridor beyond the study, listening as unfamiliar footsteps entered his castle, human footsteps, warm, hesitant, and impossibly familiar to a son who had been drawing their owner every day of his life. Evelyn Foster stepped through the front doors with snow melting along the shoulders of her navy coat and one gloved hand wrapped tightly around the handle of a weathered travel case. She had expected an old estate, perhaps a stern housekeeper, and a drafty guest room. She had not expected a vaulted entrance hall lit by hundreds of candles, black marble floors reflecting gold light, or a line of silent servants watching her as though she had crossed a boundary no ordinary visitor was meant to see. Mr. Hale approached first. His expression was courteous, but his eyes remained fixed on her face for 1 second too long. "Miss Foster, welcome to Castle Moretti. I apologize for the weather." Evelyn brushed a strand of damp brown hair from her cheek. The driver said the road would be easier in daylight. He was correct. The steward accepted her coat, then paused when he noticed the small crescent-shaped mark near her right eyebrow. Something changed in his posture, not fear, recognition. Evelyn noticed it immediately. Cracks beneath varnish, colors hidden under smoke damage, truths concealed by careful hands. Is something wrong? She asked. No, Miss Foster. Mr. Hale folded her coat with unnecessary precision. Nothing at all. Footsteps sounded at the far end of the hall, slow, controlled. The servants lowered their eyes at once. A tall man emerged from the shadowed corridor, dressed in black, his face pale enough to seem carved from winter itself. He appeared to be in his 30s, but the stillness in his silver-grey eyes felt far older. He did not hurry, he did not need to. The entire castle seemed to wait for him. Evelyn recognized Vincent Moretti from the limited correspondence surrounding the commission. Wealthy collector, private employer, no photographs permitted, no outside staff, no questions regarding the family collection. None of the letters had mentioned that his presence could make a room feel suddenly smaller. Miss Foster, he said. His voice was calm, low, and formal. You arrived sooner than expected, only by an hour. In this storm, an hour matters. His gaze moved from her travel case to her face, then stopped at the mark near her eyebrow. The silence lasted just long enough to become uncomfortable. Evelyn held his stare. You hired me to restore a portrait. I did. Then I assume you would like me to see it before the damage gets worse. A faint change touched Vincent's expression. It was not quite amusement, but it was the first sign that he was not made entirely of stone. Before he could answer, a small figure appeared behind him. The boy stood barefoot on the cold floor, wearing a dark sweater and grey trousers. His charcoal-stained fingers curled around a folded sheet of paper. Evelyn's attention left Vincent at once. The child's face was pale, even beneath the warm candlelight, and his silver-grey eyes were fixed on her with such complete certainty that she forgot to breathe. Lucien, Vincent said quietly. He walked forward, one step, then another. Every servant in the hall remained motionless. Evelyn sensed that she should wait, though she did not understand why. Lucien stopped 3 feet away and studied her as if checking the final detail of a memory. His gaze moved to her hair, her eyes, then he unfolded the paper. Evelyn looked down. The portrait was hers. Not similar, not suggestive. Hers. The same loose hair, the same thoughtful eyes. The same small mark above even the navy coat was there, darkened with snow at the shoulders. Her fingers tightened around the travel case. Who drew this? She asked, although she already knew. Lucia raised his charcoal-stained hand. I did. His voice was soft, but the words carried through the silent hall. Evelyn forced herself to smile gently. You are very talented. I have been waiting for you. The air seemed to leave the room. Vincent's gaze sharpened. Mr. Hale looked down. Somewhere above them, an old clock began to strike midnight. Evelyn counted each note because counting felt easier than understanding. When the final chime faded, Lucien stepped closer and held out the picture. You came back, he said. I have never been here before. Lucien looked past her toward the open doors where snow moved through the darkness like pale ash. You have, he whispered. The castle remembers you. At that moment, a heavy sound echoed from the west wing. Not a crash, but the slow groan of an old wooden door opening by itself. Mr. Hale went still. Vincent turned toward the sound. That gallery has been locked for 20 years, he said. Lucien placed the drawing into Evelyn's hands. It opened because she is here. Vincent moved first. No one enters the West Gallery, he said, and the quiet authority in his voice stopped every servant from taking another breath. The open doorway waited at the end of the corridor, 50 feet away, its darkness untouched by candlelight. Evelyn looked from the gallery to the portrait in her hands. The charcoal image showed her standing beneath the castle gates, but now she noticed something she had missed before. Behind the drawn version of herself, faint lines formed the outline of that same doorway. Did you draw this tonight? She asked Lucien. Before you came. Vincent held out his hand. Give me the picture. Lucien stepped closer to Evelyn instead. Then, without warning, he wrapped both arms around her waist. A soft gasp passed through the entrance hall. Mr. Hale lowered his head, but several servants stared openly. Vincent did not move, only his eyes changed. Evelyn felt the boy trembling beneath the dark sweater, not with fear, with relief. She placed one hand carefully between his shoulders. Lucien, Vincent said more gently than before. Come here. The prince held on. She is warm. The simple words struck the hall harder than a shout. Evelyn glanced at Vincent and saw something unguarded cross his pale face, pain quickly hidden. She understood then that Lucien did not often touch anyone. Perhaps he never did. It is all right, she said softly. I am not going anywhere this minute. Lucien loosened his arms but kept one hand around 2 of her fingers, as if testing whether she might disappear. Vincent approached them. Up close, his face was even paler than she had realized, almost colorless beneath the gold light. His gaze settled on their joined hands. My son does not welcome strangers, he said. I noticed he does not speak to them. I noticed that too. Evelyn looked toward the servants. Every pair of eyes shifted away at once. Is there something else I should notice? Vincent was silent for a moment. He has drawn your face every day for 8 years. Her hand went still inside Lucien's. That is not possible. I agree. He is 8 years old. Yes, then he could not have drawn me before he learned to hold a pencil. Lucien, I used chalk first. Evelyn searched his face for mischief and found none. Vincent turned toward Mr. Hale. Clear the hall. No one discusses what happened here. The servants bowed and withdrew with unusual speed. Their footsteps vanished into distant passages, leaving only the old clock and the quiet hiss of the fire. When the doors closed, Vincent faced Evelyn again. You may leave tonight. A carriage can take you back to the village. Through 2 feet of snow, you would be escorted. And the portrait you hired me to restore, it can wait. Evelyn studied him. He wanted her gone. Not because he distrusted her skill, but because her presence had disturbed something he could not control. She knew that expression. Museum directors wore it when a hidden signature appeared beneath a celebrated painting. Owners wore it when restoration uncovered a truth more valuable than the artwork itself. The gallery opened when I arrived, she said. Your son drew me before he met me. Sending me away will not answer either question. Vincent's silver-grey eyes held hers. Curiosity safe, neither is ignorance. For the first time, Lucien smiled. It was small and brief, but Vincent saw it. His resistance weakened in the silence that followed. At last he turned toward the west corridor. Mr. Hale will prepare a room for you. Evelyn glanced at the waiting darkness. And the gallery? It remains closed until morning. Lucien tightened his fingers around hers. It will not stay closed. As if the castle had heard him, candles along the west corridor ignited one after another, each flame rising without a human hand. Gold light traveled toward the open doorway. Inside the gallery, dozens of pale rectangles appeared on the walls, portraits. Evelyn took one step forward. Vincent caught her wrist, not roughly, but with unmistakable urgency. Do not look yet, too late. The nearest canvas had already emerged from the dark. A woman stood painted beneath a winter moon, wearing clothes from another century. Her hair was different, her dress was unfamiliar, but the face was Evelyn's, down to the crescent-shaped mark above her right eyebrow. Evelyn could not look away. The painted woman stood beneath a silver moon, one hand resting on the stone railing of a balcony Evelyn had never seen, yet the expression on her face was unmistakable. Calm eyes, soft mouth, the same small crescent mark near her right eyebrow. Only the clothing belonged to another age. Vincent released Evelyn's wrist the moment he realized she would not step closer. His hand fell to his side, but his attention remained fixed on the canvas. That portrait was not here when the gallery was sealed, he said. Mr. Hale had returned silently to the corridor, carrying a ring of iron keys. Your Majesty, nothing in this room has been moved for 20 years. Then explain it. The steward looked at Evelyn, then at Lucien. I cannot. Lucien walked past them into the gallery. His bare feet made almost no sound against the cold floor. Wait, Evelyn said. The boy stopped beside the first portrait and touched the wooden frame with 2 fingers. The candles along the walls brightened. More paintings emerged from the shadows. A woman in a green traveling dress. A woman seated beside a library window. A woman standing near the castle fountain in summer. The faces were not exact copies of one another. The hairstyles changed. The clothing shifted across decades. But each carried something of Evelyn so precise that coincidences are not all me, she whispered. Vincent entered the room beside her. No, then who are they? He studied the nearest portrait. I do not know. Evelyn moved closer, careful not to touch the painted surface. The varnish was cloudy. Fine cracks crossed the dark background. The portrait had age, real age, but the face appeared clearer than everything around it, almost untouched by time. This painting has been altered, she said. Vincent turned toward her. The lower layers are older than the face. Someone painted over the original subject. Lucien looked up at her. Can you find her, perhaps? Evelyn crouched slightly, examining the edge of the canvas, but not tonight. I need proper light, magnification, and a stable work surface. Vincent's gaze shifted to the open doorway behind them. The West Restoration Room is beside this gallery. Mr. Hale stared at him. That room was ordered closed with the others. Open it. The steward hesitated only a second before selecting a lock turned with a heavy click. Inside, dust covered a broad table, cabinets, lamps, and old tools arranged as if their owner had stepped away and never returned. Evelyn crossed the threshold slowly. The room smelled of wood, linen, and dried oil. A tall window overlooked the snow-covered courtyard. On the central table rested a single object beneath a grey cloth. Lucien moved toward it. Vincent reached him first. "Do not touch anything," and lifted one corner of the cloth with gloved fingers. Beneath it lay a wooden restoration box, old but carefully preserved. Her breath caught. A delicate letter had been carved into the lid. F. "That was my grandmother's last initial," she said. Vincent's stillness deepened. "What was her full name?" "Margaret Foster." Mr. Hale dropped the key ring. The metal struck the floor, sending a sharp echo through the room. Vincent turned. "You know that name." The steward bent to retrieve the keys, but his hands were no longer steady. "I heard it once, many years ago." "From whom?" Mr. Hale looked toward the covered portraits beyond the doorway. "From the Queen." Lucien slipped his hand into Evelyn's. Vincent's face remained composed, but his voice grew quieter. "My wife died 20 years ago. Miss Foster is 28. There is no reason her grandmother's name should have been spoken in this castle." "There was a reason," Mr. Hale said. "I was instructed never to reveal it unless a woman bearing the Foster name entered the West Gallery." Silence settled around them. Evelyn looked down at the restoration box. A small brass latch held it closed. Unlike everything else in the room, it carried no dust. "Who gave you that instruction?" she asked. Mr. Hale met Vincent's eyes. "The Queen herself." Vincent reached for the latch, but Lucien spoke before he touched it. "Not yet." Everyone turned toward the boy. He pointed to the carved letter on the lid, beneath the F. A second mark was slowly appearing in the wood, darkening as if traced by an invisible hand. It formed a crescent identical to the one above Evelyn's eyebrow. Then, from inside the locked box, came the soft sound of a music mechanism beginning to play. The melody inside the restoration box was faint, no louder than breath against glass, yet every person in the room recognized that it did not belong to the present. Vincent's hand remained above the brass latch. He did not touch it. Evelyn listened as the notes rose and fell in a slow pattern, gentle enough for a nursery, solemn enough for a farewell. Lucien leaned against her side. "I know that song," he whispered. Vincent looked at him. "From where?" The boy closed his eyes. "From before I could remember." Mr. Hale lowered his gaze. "The Queen used to play it for him." Vincent's expression did not change, but the silence around him grew heavier. Evelyn watched his pale face and understood that whatever waited inside the box was not merely evidence. It belonged to a grief the castle had kept sealed for 20 years. She stepped back from the table. "You should open it," she said. Vincent looked at her. "It bears your family name." For one brief moment, neither of them moved. Then Lucien placed his small hand over Vincent's. "Together," he said. Vincent released the latch. The lid rose without resistance. The melody became clearer. Inside lay several carefully wrapped brushes, a silver magnifying lens, and a stack of letters tied with faded blue ribbon. On top rested a small music mechanism engraved with two initials, MF and EM. Evelyn reached toward it, then stopped. "Margaret Foster," she said. Vincent's voice was almost inaudible. "And Elena Moretti." Lucien touched the blue ribbon. "Mother." Vincent did not correct him, though Lucien had been an infant when the Queen died. Evelyn lifted the first letter. The paper had yellowed at the edges, but the seal remained unbroken. Across the front, in elegant handwriting, were the words, "For the woman who returns to finish the portrait." "That sounds like me," Evelyn said. "It could refer to anyone in your family," Vincent replied. "My mother had no sisters. My grandmother had one daughter. I am the last Foster." Mr. Hale stepped closer. "The Queen knew that." Vincent turned sharply. "You knew Miss Foster's family line, only part of it. Her Majesty told me that Margaret Foster had a granddaughter, but she did not give me a name. Why was I never told?" Mr. Hale met the King's stare with visible difficulty. "Because you ordered the West Gallery sealed before her instructions could be completed." The words settled like dust. Lucien watched his father. But Vincent only looked toward the dark paintings beyond the doorway. "I sealed it the night Elena died," he said. "I never returned." His voice carried no defense, only fact. Evelyn understood the shape of the regret before he admitted it. He had closed the room to survive the loss, and in doing so he had buried whatever his wife meant to preserve. She untied the ribbon. Vincent did not stop her. The first letter was addressed to Margaret Foster. Evelyn unfolded it carefully, but the ink had faded so badly that only fragments remained visible. "Thank you for keeping him alive. The portrait must remain hidden. When your blood returns, the castle will remember what we could not safely say." Evelyn read the lines twice. "Keeping whom alive?" she asked. Mr. Hale shook his head. "I do not know." Vincent took the letter and studied the faded script. "This is Elena's hand." Lucien moved toward the doorway. The nearest portrait seemed brighter now, its clouded surface catching the candlelight. "The face was painted over," she said. "If my grandmother worked here, she may have hidden the original subject." Vincent looked at the restoration tools inside the box. Can you uncover it? Not quickly. The paint layers must be tested first. One mistake could erase what is underneath. Then you will have everything you require. Evelyn glanced at him. An hour ago you wanted me gone. An hour ago I believed you were a stranger. And now? His silver-grey eyes rested on her with a caution that no longer felt like distrust. Now I believe my wife waited 20 years for you to arrive. Before Evelyn could answer, Lucien stepped into the gallery and lifted the drawing he had made that evening. He held it beside the ancient portrait. The woman in charcoal and the woman beneath the cracked varnish faced each other across time. Then Lucien pointed to the lower corner of the painted canvas. Beneath the darkened surface, a hidden signature was beginning to appear. Margaret Foster. Under it, another line emerged thinner and almost erased. Not a name, a warning. Do not reveal the woman until the king is ready to remember why she was hidden. Vincent read the warning twice, but no recognition entered his eyes. I do not remember ordering any woman hidden, he said. The message does not say you ordered it, Evelyn replied. It says you were not ready to remember why. The distinction seemed to trouble him more. Dawn had not yet reached the mountains, but the storm outside was weakening. Snow brushed softly against the tall windows while Mr. Hale brought lamps, clean cloths, distilled water, and every conservation tool Evelyn requested. She arranged them across the restoration table with careful precision. The familiar routine steadied her. Brushes in one row, cotton swabs in another, magnifying lens near her right hand, notes placed far from the open flame. Lucien watched from a wooden chair wrapped in a wool blanket that was much too large for him. Vincent remained near the doorway, silent and motionless, as though he feared leaving the room would cause it to close again. I need to test the varnish before I touch the painted layers, Evelyn said. How long will that take? As long as the portrait requires. That is not an answer. It is the only honest one. Mr. Hale lowered his eyes, perhaps expecting Vincent to object. Instead, the king stepped closer to the table. Then honesty will be sufficient. Evelyn selected a small area near the edge of the canvas and began her examination. Under magnification, the painting revealed several different hands. The background belonged to the oldest layer. The clothing had been added later. The face was newer still, though not recent. Someone had built the woman from separate moments, hiding one truth beneath another. Your grandmother did this, Vincent. Part of it. The signature is hers, but another artist worked before her. Can you identify the first painter? Not yet. Lucien climbed down from the chair and approached the table. The woman is sleeping, he said. Evelyn paused. Inside the painting? He nodded. She does not want to wake up alone. Vincent's gaze moved to his son. What do you see? Nothing. Lucien touched his chest. I feel her waiting. Evelyn placed the brush down. The boy looked tired now, the certainty in his face giving way to something smaller and more vulnerable. She pulled the second chair beside hers. You can wait here, but you must not touch the canvas. Lucien sat without argument. After several minutes, his head rested against her arm. Vincent watched them from across the table. He has never stayed in this room, he said. He seems comfortable. He is comfortable with you. Evelyn looked down at the boy. Perhaps he was waiting for someone who would listen before deciding he was wrong. The words were gentle, but Vincent received them like a judgment. I listened. Did you believe him? Vincent did not answer. The lamps hummed softly. Lucien's breathing slowed. Evelyn returned to the portrait, applying a tiny amount of solvent to the test area. The cloudy varnish softened, revealing a deeper shade beneath, not skin, fabric, dark blue, almost black, decorated with a thin silver line. There is another figure under the woman, she said. Vincent came to her side. Another woman? I cannot tell. She cleaned a section no wider than a quarter. A painted hand appeared beneath the surface, resting beside the hidden woman's shoulder. The hand was pale and long-fingered, wearing a royal signet ring. Vincent stared at it. That ring belonged to my family. Can you tell whose hand it is? He leaned closer, his face nearly colorless in the lamplight. Mine, Evelyn looked at him. This layer is older than I am. I have worn that ring for more than 400 years. For the first time since entering the castle, Evelyn felt the true weight of what stood beside her. Not a private collector, not merely a grieving father, something ancient enough to recognize his own hand in a forgotten century. Lucien opened his eyes. Vincent looked at the concealed figures, then shook his head. No. Evelyn examined the exposed section again. Along the edge of Vincent's painted sleeve, several faded letters appeared beneath the varnish. She adjusted the magnifying lens and read them aloud. The night the king made his promise. Vincent stepped back, his composure finally cracked. I made no promise to Margaret Foster. From inside the restoration box, the music stopped. A hidden compartment beneath the brushes clicked open. Inside lay one sealed letter addressed in the Queen's hand. To Vincent, when the portrait begins to remember him, Vincent broke the Queen's seal with a hand that had remained steady through centuries of war, mourning, and silence, yet trembled now beneath the weight of a single envelope. The paper inside was thin and brittle. Elena's handwriting crossed the page in dark blue ink. "My dearest Vincent, if you are reading this, then the castle has begun returning what grief forced you to forget. Do not blame yourself. The memory was hidden because the promise could not survive if our enemies discovered it. Trust the child. Trust the woman Margaret sends after us. Most of all, understand that Lucien does not see the future. He hears what these walls remember." Vincent stopped reading. Evelyn watched the colorless stillness settle over his face. "Lucien is not predicting anything," she said softly. The boy stood beside the restoration table, his silver-grey eyes fixed on the painted hand beneath the newer layers. "I told you," he whispered. "The castle remembers." Mr. Hale stepped closer. "Memory echoes." Vincent looked at him sharply. "You know the term only from old royal records. Certain places can preserve moments of powerful emotion, not images exactly, impressions, voices, faces. A child of the royal bloodline may sense them before learning to separate memory from the present." Evelyn glanced toward the West Gallery, where dozens of portraits waited in the candlelight. "Then Lucien did not draw me because he had seen me coming." "No," Vincent said. His gaze moved to the crescent mark near her eyebrow. "He drew you because the castle remembered someone from your family." Lucien shook his head. "Not someone like her, her." He touched the charcoal portrait. The walls kept changing the clothes, but the face stayed the same. Evelyn felt the mystery shift rather than disappear. The drawings were not a prophecy, yet the castle had somehow used her face to carry an old memory forward. Vincent returned to the letter. Elena had written more. Margaret discovered that memory echoes do not preserve time in a straight line. They search for the person capable of completing what was left unfinished. The castle knew the foster line would return, but it could not know which woman would answer. It borrowed the face of the one who finally would. Evelyn read the sentence over his shoulder. "That is why the portraits look like me, and why some wear clothing from different periods," Vincent said. "The memory kept repeating itself until you arrived." Lucien looked relieved. She was trying to find the right door. Evelyn knelt beside him. Who was trying? The boy pointed to the hidden figure beneath the portrait. The Queen. Silence followed. Vincent turned toward the canvas. Elena created the echo. "Perhaps not alone," Evelyn said. "My grandmother may have helped her anchor it inside the paintings." Mr. Hale nodded slowly. "Margaret restored every portrait in this wing during the Queen's final year." Vincent continued reading. The final lines were shorter. "When Evelyn Foster enters the gallery, show her the northern wall. Let her uncover the portrait in stages. The truth beneath it belongs to Vincent, but the choice that follows belongs to her. Do not open the archive chamber until the painting reveals the silver key." Evelyn stared at her own name. "She knew exactly who I would be." "Or the letter changed when the memory found you," Mr. Hale said. Evelyn looked down at the paper. The ink appeared old, but the possibility sent a chill through her. Vincent folded the letter with great care. "Where is the northern wall?" Mr. Hale raised one of the lamps. They crossed the gallery together, Lucien holding Evelyn's hand. The far wall was covered by a single curtain reaching nearly 20 feet from ceiling to floor. Vincent pulled the cord. Dust drifted through the golden light as the fabric opened, revealing a massive unfinished painting. At its center stood the same hidden woman. Beside her was Vincent, wearing the royal signet ring. Between them rested a small wooden case painted with the Foster crescent. Evelyn approached the canvas, had begun to clear without solvent or touch. A silver key appeared beneath the fading varnish. Lucien pressed his palm against the wall below it. Stone shifted with a low, ancient sound. A narrow doorway opened behind the painting, releasing cold air scented with paper and cedar. Vincent lifted the lamp. Beyond the threshold, shelves disappeared into darkness. On the nearest table lay a ledger bearing Margaret Foster's name, and beneath it, one sentence had been written for the king. "You did not forget the promise. You asked us to take it from you." Vincent entered the archive chamber first, holding the lamp high as cold air moved through rows of cedar shelves. Evelyn followed with Lucien beside her, while Mr. Hale remained near the doorway, listening to the castle as if it might speak again. Dust covered everything except the ledger on the nearest table. Its leather binding was cracked with age, but Margaret Foster's name remained clear beneath the light. The first pages contained restoration notes, pigment formulas, dates, and descriptions of portraits in the West Gallery. Then the handwriting changed. The letters grew larger, more urgent. His Majesty has agreed. The memory must be removed before dawn. Evelyn read the line over his shoulder. Agreed to what? Vincent turned the page. A folded sheet had been pressed between two entries. Mr. Hale recognized the royal seal before Vincent opened it. The document was written in Vincent's own hand. I authorize Queen Elena Moretti and Margaret Foster to conceal my memory of the promise until the foster heir returns. The knowledge places both families in danger. I accept the cost. Vincent stared at his signature. I wrote this. Why would remembering a promise be dangerous? Evelyn asked. Lucien moved toward a shelf at the back of the chamber, because someone was listening. His voice carried strangely through the room, followed by another voice, distant and softened by time. Keep the child hidden. The whisper had not come from Lucien. It seemed to rise from the stone itself. Vincent crossed the room in an instant and lifted Lucien into his arms. What do you hear? The boy pressed one hand against his father's chest. The night you forgot, the lamps flickered. Shadows gathered across the archive walls, not forming bodies, but impressions of movement. Elena's voice returned, quiet and steady. Margaret, if the council learns what Vincent promised, they will prevent it. Another voice answered, an older woman, human. Then the memory must remain in the paintings until my family can finish the work. Evelyn recognized the warmth in that voice without ever having heard it before. My grandmother, she whispered. Vincent closed his eyes. The echo continued around them, deeper and burdened by a grief not yet lived. Take the memory, protect Elena, protect the child. When the foster heir comes, give her what I could not. The chamber fell silent. Vincent lowered Lucien slowly. The promise concerned my son. Evelyn turned toward the ledger. Then why involve my family? She searched through the next pages until she found a drawing of the wooden case shown in the unfinished portrait. Beneath it, Margaret had written, "The king has placed the future of the royal child in human hands, not because our blood is powerful, but because our choice cannot be commanded by vampire law." Vincent read the words with her. A human decision, he said. Something the council could not control. Mr. Hale finally entered the chamber. There was a law 20 years ago. No human could be granted permanent protection within the royal household without unanimous approval, and the council would never have approved Margaret. Vincent said. Evelyn looked at him. Why would she need protection? Mr. Hale's face tightened with old sorrow. Because she discovered that Lucien's memory echoes would grow stronger with age. Without guidance, the voices of the castle could overwhelm his own thoughts. The Queen believed Margaret's restoration methods could teach him to separate the past from the present. Lucien looked down at his charcoal-stained fingers. That is why the pictures would not stop. Evelyn understood at once. The drawings were not a message for the court. They were a way to release the memories. Vincent faced the rows of shelves. My promise was to bring the Foster family into this castle and place Lucien under their protection. Not their protection, Evelyn said softly. Their care. She turned another page. A final entry had been written on the night Elena died. Vincent has asked us to hide the promise until a Foster returns freely. The choice must never be forced. If she stays, she will become Lucien's anchor. If she leaves, the castle must release her without blame. Evelyn read the passage twice. The decision Elena had preserved for 20 years was not a command, inheritance, or prophecy. It was hers. Vincent stepped away from the table, giving her more space than the narrow room required. You came here to restore one painting, he said. You owe us nothing beyond that. Lucien's expression remained brave, but his small hands tightened at his sides. Evelyn knelt before him. When the castle remembers too much, what happens? I forget which feelings are mine. The honesty in his answer broke through every mystery surrounding them. Evelyn took his hand. Then we begin by teaching you the difference. Lucien looked at Vincent, hardly daring to believe her. She is staying? Evelyn rose and met the king's silver-grey eyes. Until the portrait is finished and Lucien no longer has to face the echoes alone. Warmth returned to the lamps. Somewhere beyond the hidden doorway, every clock in the west wing began moving at once. Vincent looked toward the ledger where new ink was spreading across the final blank line in Margaret Foster's hand. The heir has chosen to remain. Now show her what the promise was meant to protect. The new sentence in Margaret Foster's ledger faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only a faint impression in the paper. Evelyn ran one finger above the empty line without touching it. What was the promise meant to protect? She asked. Lucien turned toward the far end of the archive, where a narrow staircase curved downward behind the cedar shelves. The stone steps had been hidden in darkness moments before, but now a soft silver light gathered along their edges. "That way," he said. Vincent took the lamp and descended first. Evelyn followed with Lucien between them, while Mr. Hale carried the ledger against his chest. The staircase opened into a circular chamber beneath the west gallery. At its center stood a low platform surrounded by painted wooden panels. Each panel showed a different season at Castle Moretti. Spring rain against the windows, summer roses climbing the southern wall, autumn leaves covering the courtyard, winter snow beneath a moonless sky. The final panel remained unfinished. Only the outline of a child had been drawn there. Lucien approached it slowly. "This room knows me." Vincent's expression tightened. "I have never seen it." "You were not meant to," Mr. Hale said. He opened Margaret's ledger to a marked page. This was called the Quiet Room. The Queen and Margaret built it for the prince. Evelyn examined the panels. The brushwork was unmistakably her grandmother's. Fine layers of color had been applied to create depth without overwhelming the eye. The scenes were calm, ordered, and separated from one another by thin silver borders. It was designed to organize the echoes, she said. Each memory had a place, a season, a wall. Lucien could learn to recognize what belonged to the castle and what belonged to him. Lucien placed his hand against the winter panel. A distant sound moved through the chamber. Elena humming, Margaret laughing softly. Vincent speaking in a voice warmer than Evelyn had ever heard. The echoes overlapped for only a moment before Lucien pulled his hand away. "Too many," he whispered. Evelyn knelt beside him. "Then we do not listen to all of them at once." She pointed to the silver lines between the panels. "Your grandmother made boundaries. She was teaching the room to separate one memory from another." "My grandmother?" Lucien asked. Evelyn smiled gently. "Mine, but she made this for you." Vincent looked toward the unfinished panel. Why was it never completed? Mr. Hale turned several pages in the ledger. His voice grew quieter as he read. "The final panel must be finished by the foster heir. Only then will the room recognize Lucien's own memories and stop repeating those left by others." Evelyn stared at the blank outline of the child. That was the promise. Vincent nodded slowly. "To protect Lucien from being consumed by the past. And to allow a human to complete what vampire law would not permit," Mr. Hale added. Lucien looked at Evelyn. "Can you finish it?" She studied the panel carefully. The wood remained stable. The original sketch was intact. Small notes had been written along the lower border in Margaret's hand. "Paint him as he is, not as the castle remembers him." Evelyn felt the meaning settle over her. Every portrait upstairs had been shaped by memory echoes. Every drawing Lucien made had carried someone else's unfinished grief. This panel required something different, the truth of the child standing before her now. "I can," she said, "but I need to know what belongs to you." Lucien frowned. "I do not understand." "What do you like when no one is asking you to remember anything?" He looked uncertain. Vincent opened his mouth, then stopped himself. Evelyn waited. At last, Lucien said, "Warm bread in the morning. Good. The sound of snow falling from the roof. Good. Blue pencils. Not charcoal?" Evelyn smiled. "Anything else?" Lucien looked at Vincent, then back at her. "When father reads and forgets to sound like a king." Vincent lowered his eyes. The admission crossed the chamber with more power than any ancient echo. Evelyn stood and examined the unfinished panel again. "Then that is where we begin." She asked Mr. Hale to bring her restoration box, fresh pigments, and a stool. Vincent remained near the platform while Lucien described small pieces of himself for the first time. He liked old maps. He disliked bells at dinner. He wanted a dog, though Mr. Hale had always said the castle was unsuitable. Each answer gave Evelyn another color: soft blue for quiet mornings, warm gold for bread and candlelight. Deep green for the forest path he watched from his window but had never walked alone. Hours passed, the storm ended. Pale morning light entered through a hidden opening high above them. As Evelyn painted, the child on the panel slowly stopped looking like a royal symbol and began looking like Lucien. When she added a blue pencil to his hand, the room became completely silent. No whispers, no borrowed voices, no footsteps from another century. Lucien looked around in wonder. They stopped. Vincent crossed the chamber and knelt before his son. "What do you hear now?" Lucien listened. His small face softened. "Only us." Behind them, the unfinished background of the panel began revealing a second figure beside the painted boy. Not Vincent, not Elena. A woman holding a restoration brush. Evelyn recognized her own outline just as a final inscription appeared beneath the silver border. The foster heir was never meant to serve the royal family. She was meant to teach it how to remember without losing the living. The inscription beneath the silver border remained visible long after the room fell silent, and Vincent read it as though each word had been written directly into the part of him he had spent 20 years refusing to face. Evelyn set down her brush. Lucien stood before the completed panel, listening. No queen humming from another century, no hidden footsteps, no borrowed grief, only the soft crackle of the lamps and the quiet breathing of the three people beside him. "How do you feel?" Evelyn asked. Lucien considered the question with care. Smaller, Vincent's expression changed. Smaller, in a good way. The boy looked around the circular chamber. "The castle was always inside my head. Now I am only inside the castle." Evelyn smiled, but Vincent turned away. He moved toward the winter panel and placed one hand against the painted snow. Nothing answered him. For the first time, the past did not rise to meet his touch. "Elena built this room because she knew what would happen to him," he said. "And I sealed the only path to it." "You did not know what you were sealing," Evelyn replied. "I chose not to know." His voice stayed calm, but the admission carried more weight than anger. "I asked them to take the memory. I believed forgetting would protect everyone. Instead, Lucien carried what I refused to remember." Lucien stepped toward him. "Father, it was not your fault." Vincent looked down at his son. "A king is responsible for what he chooses not to see." Evelyn crossed the chamber slowly. "Then do not look away now." He met her eyes. In the pale morning light, his face seemed even whiter than the stone behind him, but his expression was no longer distant. "What remains?" he asked. Evelyn glanced at the panel. The figure beside Lucien had appeared, but its features were still unfinished. "The room recognized my role. That does not mean the work is complete." Mr. Hale opened Margaret's ledger again. A final page had loosened from the binding. He unfolded it carefully. "There is another instruction." Vincent took the page. The writing belonged to Elena. "When Lucien hears only his own heart, bring him to the king's chamber." The promise was not only to protect the child, it was also to return the father he lost before he could know him. Lucien looked confused. "I never lost father." Vincent closed his eyes briefly. Evelyn understood before he spoke. "You lost the version of him that existed before the queen died." The boy looked up at Vincent with quiet attention. Vincent's hand tightened around the letter. "There was a room above the eastern tower," he said. "Elena called it ours. After she died, I had it locked." Mr. Hale lowered his head. "The key has remained in your study." Vincent did not move. The eastern tower was not hidden by magic or memory. It was closed by grief alone. Evelyn gathered the brushes while Lucien carried the blue pencil from the painted panel. Together they left the quiet room and climbed through the gallery as daylight spread across the castle windows. The servants had begun moving through the halls, but each one stepped aside when they saw the king walking beside the human restorer and his son. No order was given, no explanation was offered. The change traveled through the castle in silence. In Vincent's study, the black key rested where it had remained for 20 years, inside the top drawer of his desk. He held it for a long moment before placing it in Lucien's hand. "You open it," he said. The eastern tower stood nearly 100 feet above the courtyard. At the top of the stairs, Lucien inserted the key into a narrow white door. The lock turned easily. Warm morning light poured from the room beyond. Dust covered the floor, but the space had not decayed. A piano stood near the windows. A child's cradle rested against one wall. Beside it was an unfinished wooden horse, small enough for a toddler. Vincent stopped at the threshold. His composure disappeared, not in tears, but in stillness so complete that Evelyn could feel the years he had buried. Lucien walked to the wooden horse and touched its carved mane. "Did you make this?" Vincent nodded. "For you. Why did you never finish it?" "Because every time I entered this room, I remembered what was missing." Lucien looked at the unfinished wood. "I was still here." The words crossed the room softly. Vincent lowered himself to one knee before his son. He said, "You were." Lucien placed the blue pencil in his father's hand. "Then finish something." Vincent looked at the pencil, then at Evelyn. She saw the decision form before he spoke. Not a royal command, not an ancient promise. A father choosing the living over the memory of the dead. He stood and opened the shutters. Sunlight filled the eastern tower for the first time in 20 years. Across the room, the final covered portrait slid from the wall and revealed Queen Elena smiling beside Margaret Foster. Between them was an empty space shaped for one last figure, and beneath it waited a single unfinished sentence. "When the king chooses to live again, the promise will be complete." Vincent stood before the unfinished sentence, while morning light spread across the eastern tower, revealing every object grief had preserved exactly as it had been. The cradle, the piano, the small wooden horse, the covered shelves where Elena had once kept music books and letters. Nothing in the room demanded that he forget her. It demanded only that he stop mistaking stillness for loyalty. Lucien remained beside the wooden horse, watching his father with careful hope. Evelyn crossed to the portrait of Elena and Margaret. The empty space between them had been prepared with a thin layer of pale ground, smooth and untouched. "This was meant to be completed later," she said. Mr. Hale examined the frame. "By whom?" Evelyn looked at the fine brush marks along the border. "My grandmother began it, but she left the final figure for someone else." Vincent read the sentence again. "When the king chooses to live again, the promise will be complete." He turned toward Evelyn. "What does living again require? That is not a question a painting can answer for you." Her voice was gentle, but it did not offer him an escape. Vincent looked at Lucien. "Then perhaps my son can." Lucien considered him with the seriousness of someone far older than 8. "Come to breakfast." Vincent's expression shifted. "Breakfast? You always eat alone in your study. I eat with Mr. Hale. Miss Foster eats wherever someone remembers to bring her food." Evelyn raised one eyebrow. Mr. Hale looked almost offended. "I have not forgotten. Yesterday you brought her tea and no breakfast." The storm disrupted the kitchen. Lucien ignored the defense. "Come to breakfast. Then finish the horse. Then walk with us outside when the snow stops falling from the roof." Vincent lowered his gaze to the blue pencil still resting in his hand. "Is that all?" "No." Lucien stepped closer. "Listen when I tell you what I remember, but do not make me live inside it." The words held no accusation. That made them harder to bear. Vincent knelt and placed one hand on his son's shoulder. "I will learn." Lucien looked at Evelyn. "Will you teach him?" She smiled faintly. "I think you already started." They left the tower together. By the time they reached the dining room, news of the opened eastern shutters had traveled through the castle. Servants moved quietly along the walls, glancing toward Vincent, as though daylight on his face were a royal announcement. He took the chair beside Lucien instead of the one at the head of the table. Warm bread arrived first. Lucien broke the smallest loaf in half and gave one piece to his father. Vincent accepted it without ceremony. Evelyn watched the boy's shoulders relax. The moment was ordinary, and because it was ordinary, it mattered more than any hidden chamber. After breakfast, Vincent ordered the royal council summoned to the West Gallery. They arrived before noon, dressed in dark formal coats, their expressions guarded as they faced the human woman standing beside the king. Several recognized the Foster name, more recognized the old law that had prevented Margaret from serving openly in the royal household. Vincent did not ask for their approval. "Queen Elena and Margaret Foster created the quiet room to protect my son. I allowed fear of the council to hide their work. That fear ends today." One councillor stepped forward. "Your Majesty?" Human influence within the royal household remains restricted. Vincent's gaze became cold enough to silence the room. "Then the restriction is removed. The law requires unanimous consent. The law was created by the crown. It will be ended by the crown." He turned toward Evelyn. "Miss Foster came here under contract to restore a portrait. She stayed by choice to help Lucien. No one will call her servant, subject, or possession. She stands under royal protection as an independent guardian of the West Archive and the Quiet Room." The council chamber remained silent. Evelyn looked at Vincent, surprised not by the protection but by the precision of his words. He had understood the promise. Her choice could not be commanded, even by him. Lucien stepped beside her and placed his blue pencil in her hand. "Now it is official," he whispered. One by one, the councillors bowed, not to Evelyn as royalty, but to the place she had earned through courage and care. The change was small enough to fit inside a single gesture, yet it crossed centuries of law. Later, in the eastern tower, Vincent finished carving the wooden horse, while Lucien sanded the rough edges under Evelyn's guidance. When the final piece was set in place, the unfinished sentence beneath the portrait completed itself in Elena's handwriting. "The king has chosen the living, and the child is no longer alone." For 3 days, Castle Moretti became quieter in a way Lucien had never known. The silence no longer felt crowded. It did not carry Elena's unfinished songs, Margaret Foster's hurried instructions, or the distant voices of servants who had crossed the same corridors centuries before. It belonged to the present. Lucien tested it everywhere. In the West Gallery, he stood before the old portraits and listened. Nothing entered his thoughts unless he chose to touch the frames. In the quiet room, he placed his palm against each painted season and heard only a faint echo, separate from himself and easy to release. In the eastern tower, he rode the finished wooden horse across the sunlit floor while Vincent sat nearby with an open book, occasionally forgetting to sound like a king. Evelyn watched from the window as snow slipped from the roof in soft white sheets. The change in Lucien was not dramatic. He did not become loud. He did not suddenly fill the castle with laughter. He simply began to choose things: blue pencils instead of charcoal, honey on his bread, a green scarf for the courtyard, small choices, each one proving that his own voice had survived beneath the memories of the dead. On the fourth morning, Evelyn entered the restoration room and found every charcoal drawing removed from the walls. For years, Lucienne had covered the room with her face. Now, the papers had been stacked neatly on the central table. Beside them rested a new sheet and a box of colored pencils. Lucienne sat before it, staring at the blank page. "You are not drawing today," Evelyn asked. "I am trying. What is stopping you?" He looked toward the doorway. "The castle is not showing me what comes as next." Evelyn pulled a chair beside him. "Then perhaps you do not need the castle." Lucienne frowned at the white paper. "What do people draw when they are not remembering? Anything they choose. What if I choose wrong? Art is not a royal decree. You are allowed to change your mind." He considered that. Then he selected a blue pencil and drew a small window. After a moment he added snow outside it. Nothing supernatural happened. No candles brightened. Lucienne smiled anyway. Vincent entered carrying 3 cups of hot chocolate, an act that surprised Evelyn more than any ancient chamber had. "Mr. Hale said this is what human children drink after walking in the snow," he said. Lucienne accepted his cup. "I am not human, no," Vincent replied. "But you are a child." He placed the 3rd cup beside Evelyn and remained standing near the table. His silver-grey eyes moved across the old charcoal portraits. "Will the echoes return?" he asked. Evelyn answered honestly. "Possibly. The castle still remembers. The difference is that Lucien now knows those memories are not his, and if he forgets, then we remind him." Vincent looked at her. "We." The single word rested between them with quiet meaning. Evelyn did not look away. "That was the agreement. I stay until the restoration is complete and Lucien can manage the echoes safely. The restoration is nearly complete. Nearly." Vincent's face remained calm, but she saw the question he was unwilling to turn into a command. Lucien saw it too. "You could stay after," he said. Evelyn looked down at the boy. "That is not a small decision. I know. My home is in Boston. My work is there." Vincent spoke carefully. "Your work could continue here if you chose. The West Archive contains paintings no one has examined in generations. You would control the restoration program. Your name would remain your own. Your position would not depend on the court." Evelyn heard the effort beneath his formality. He was offering her a place without trying to possess her choice. "And if I say no," she asked, "a carriage will take you wherever you wish to go. Lucien and I will be grateful that you came." Lucien lowered his pencil, but he did not plead. That restraint moved her more than any request could have. Evelyn walked to the window. Beyond the glass, the grounds stretched beneath clear winter sunlight. She thought of her small apartment in Boston, the museum basement, and the paintings she restored for people who rarely asked her name. Then she thought of the quiet room, the West Gallery, and a child learning to separate memory from identity. "I will stay through spring," she said. Lucien's face brightened. Vincent remained still, waiting. Evelyn turned toward him. "After spring, I will decide again." He inclined his head. "Then spring is enough." Lucien returned to the drawing. He added 3 figures beneath the blue window, one tall, one small, one holding a paintbrush. "Is that your final picture?" she asked. Lucien shook his head. "Not yet." He turned the page face down before either adult could see more. "The last one belongs in the gallery." That evening, he carried the hidden drawing toward the west wing, while behind him the castle remained silent, waiting not to reveal the past, but to witness what the boy would choose to remember. By the first day of spring, the snow had retreated from the castle walls, revealing dark stone warmed by sunlight and the first green shoots along the courtyard path. Evelyn had completed the West Gallery restoration, but she had not packed her travel case. It remained beneath the window in her room, empty except for the navy gloves she had worn on the night she arrived. The castle no longer opened doors for her. It no longer whispered her name through paintings or sent candles burning ahead of her steps. It had accepted that she was no longer a visitor summoned by memory. She was simply there. That morning, Lucien asked Vincent and Evelyn to meet him in the West Gallery before breakfast. He stood beneath the oldest clock, wearing the green scarf he had chosen for himself and holding a framed picture against his chest. Mr. Hale waited nearby, along with the restored portrait of Queen Elena and Margaret Foster. The hidden layers had finally been revealed. Elena stood beside Margaret, their hands resting on the wooden case that had carried their promise across 20 years. Vincent's painted figure stood behind them, no longer concealed. His expression was not royal or distant. He looked frightened, hopeful, and human in every way that mattered. You finished it, Vincent said. Evelyn looked at the portrait. Your wife and my grandmother finished it. I only removed what fear placed over them. Vincent turned toward her. You did more than that. She held his gaze. During the winter, he had learned not to hide every feeling behind silence. Evelyn had learned that his silence was not emptiness. Sometimes it was caution, sometimes regret, sometimes the careful beginning of trust. Lucien stepped between them. The gallery needs one more picture. He lifted the frame and turned it around. The drawing was made in colored pencil. A tall man stood beside a woman holding a restoration brush. Between them was a small boy with a blue pencil in one hand. Behind the three figures, the castle windows glowed with warm, golden light. There were no shadows waiting beyond them, no hidden faces, no unfinished doors. Evelyn noticed that Vincent had been drawn with a book tucked beneath one arm. She had a small streak of blue paint on her sleeve. Lucien had given himself an enormous dog sitting at his feet. You added the dog before asking permission, Vincent observed. I thought that would improve my chances. Mr. Hale looked away, though his shoulders moved with quiet laughter. Evelyn knelt beside Lucien. Is this the final picture? He nodded. The others were what the castle remembered. This one is what I want to remember. Evelyn's eyes moved to the three figures. You drew me here. You are here. The answer was so simple that it dissolved every excuse she had prepared. Vincent approached, but he did not ask her to stay. He had kept his promise through the changing season. He had given her work, freedom, and a place at the table without turning gratitude into obligation. Spring has come, he said. You said you would decide again. Evelyn looked through the gallery windows. Beyond them, the road to the village was clear. She could leave that afternoon. Her carriage was ready. Her old life still existed. Yet home had never been only a place waiting behind her. Sometimes it was a place built slowly from ordinary mornings, honest choices, and a child who no longer feared his own mind. I have decided, she said. Lucien held his breath. Evelyn stood and faced Vincent. I will remain as guardian of the archive and director of restoration. Hope entered Lucien's face, but Evelyn had not finished. I will keep my name, choose my work, and return to Boston whenever I need to. Vincent inclined his head. Of course, and I will not be treated as a guest who might disappear with the weather. Something warm reached his silver-grey eyes. Then you will be treated as someone whose place here is her own. Evelyn smiled. That will be acceptable. Lucien placed the picture into Vincent's hands. Together they crossed to the empty space at the center of the gallery. Vincent hung the frame carefully beneath the oldest clock. Nothing supernatural followed. No secret chamber opened. No forgotten voice spoke. The clock continued its steady rhythm, marking seconds that belonged only to the living. Lucien took Evelyn's hand with one of his and Vincent's with the other. The three of them stood before the drawing while morning light moved across the restored portraits. Years earlier, a lonely child had filled page after page with the face of a woman he had never met. Now, for the first time, he had drawn himself between two people who had chosen to stay. The castle remembered the past, but it no longer ruled them. Above the gallery doors, the final candle faded in the spring sunlight, and beneath it hung the picture Lucien had needed all along. Not a prophecy, not a promise, but a home.